Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so if you've ever found yourself craving a warm, delicious dessert, but you absolutely dread the idea of sifting flour, measuring baking powder, or, tackling that inevitable mountain of dirty mixing bowls that just makes your kitchen look like a total disaster zone, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're looking at a dessert solution that gives you an insanely high reward for absolutely zero traditional baking fuss. We are going to learn exactly how to bake a dump cake. So let's just get right into it. All right, let's dive into this. The original recipe actually features a quote that really sets the tone for everything we're going to cover today. It says, quite simply, "This dump cake is as easy as dumping ingredients in a pan." Now, I know it sounds like a bit of a joke, right? But as you'll soon see, the playful, literal nature of the name is 100% accurate. This quote basically represents the ultimate promise of a low-effort, high-impact recipe. You don't need a stand mixer, and you certainly don't need to know any complex whisking techniques for this one. So let's formally define what we're actually talking about here. A dump cake is, well, exactly what it sounds like. A dessert made by simply dumping ingredients into a pan. Actually, it's this brilliant mid-century American baking hack that kind of bridges the gap between a fruit cobbler, a crumble, and a traditional cake. It really is the absolute perfect solution for busy people, or, hey, maybe you just aren't super confident in the kitchen, but you're craving a warm, comforting treat without all the hassle. Now, I think the most interesting part of this entire recipe is the number 5. That is the shockingly low number of ingredients required for this whole culinary project. Literally just 5. If you're a novice baker, or if you're just staring at your pantry late on a Friday night wondering what on earth you can throw together, this number is your perfect hook. You don't need some endless grocery list. Just 5 distinct items stand between you and a freshly baked dessert. Let's walk through this exact arsenal of ingredients. Paying attention to the sizes here will absolutely guarantee our success today. First, you'll need one 21-ounce can of cherry pie filling. Next, 2 8-ounce cans of crushed pineapple. And notice that crucial detail there. It is totally vital that the pineapple's drained. We really don't want excess liquid ruining the structure of our cake. Then we just need one standard 15.25-ounce package of yellow cake mix. For some texture, grab 2 cups of chopped walnuts. And finally, 3/4 of a cup of unsalted butter, and it needs to be melted. Honestly, taking the quick minute to melt that butter beforehand is a complete game changer here. All right, here's our quick chronological roadmap for this incredibly simple 5-step assembly process. Step 1, prep the oven and gather those ingredients. Step 2, mix the fruit base right there in the pan. Step 3, sprinkle the dry mix on top. Step 4, top with your walnuts and your melted butter. And finally, step 5, just bake it until it's golden. It's a beautifully streamlined flow that literally anyone can follow. So, the crucial point is just starting off right. Step 1 is simply gathering those 5 ingredients we just talked about and setting your oven temperature. You want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which translates to roughly 175 degrees Celsius for us metric users. Getting this temperature locked in early means your oven is perfectly heated and ready by the time our ultra-fast prep work is done. I mean, it really doesn't get easier than this. Step 2 is where we create our vibrant fruit foundation. You're going to stir that cherry pie filling and those drained cans of crushed pineapple together. And here is the absolute best part. You do this directly in a 9 by 13-inch baking pan. No extra bowls to clean up later. None. Once the cherries and pineapple are combined, just use a spatula or a spoon to spread that colorful, fruity mixture out into a nice, even layer across the entire bottom of the pan. Now, notice the foundational architecture of our dessert here. We're contrasting the wet fruit base, our blended cherries and pineapple, with the dry topping layer, which is our packaged yellow cake mix. The very next step in our process is to literally sprinkle that dry cake mix evenly over the wet fruit mixture. Now, the absolute golden rule here is that you do not stir it in. Seriously, just let that dry powder sit evenly right on top of the fruit. This distinct separation is exactly where the magic happens. As the dessert bakes, the moisture bubbling up from that wet fruit base begins to perfectly hydrate the dry cake mix from underneath. That's what starts the chemical process, giving the dessert its structure. Okay, now we focus on a massive sensory upgrade. Over that dry yellow cake mix layer, you're going to sprinkle your 2 cups of crunchy walnuts. Scattering these nuts directly over the dry mix, make sure they stay near the very top of the dessert. This allows them to toast just a little bit in the oven, providing this beautiful earthy crunch that perfectly balances the sweet, soft, bubbling fruit underneath. It's so good. And this brilliantly illustrates the real science behind the dump method. For our fourth step, you're going to take that 3/4 of a cup of melted butter and carefully drizzle it directly on top of the walnuts and the dry cake mix. One crucial visual cue to keep in mind here, you want to make sure minimal dry spots remain. As it bakes, this melted butter is going to seep down from the top, meeting the moisture rising from the fruit below. Together, they perfectly hydrate that dry cake mix to magically form this rich, delicious, cobbler-like crust without you ever having to knead dough or mess around with a pastry blender. With our 9 by 13 pan fully loaded, it is time for the oven. This timeline details our completely foolproof, totally hands-off baking parameters. At minute 0, you place your pan into that perfectly preheated 350-degree oven. And now, you just walk away. At the 35-minute mark, you want to return and check the color. We're looking for visual cues on the crust. And by about 40 minutes, depending on your oven, of course, you should be ready to carefully remove a perfectly baked cake. Let's look at that climactic result. You want to bake it until it's a gorgeous golden brown on top. That golden color tells you the butter and cake mix have caramelized and formed that delightful crust we're looking for. And, well, while it might be tempting to let it cool completely on the counter like a traditional sponge cake, the absolute ultimate serving suggestion to maximize its mouth-watering appeal is to serve this dessert warm, ideally with a massive, generous scoop of cold vanilla ice cream melting right over the top of that crunchy, buttery crust. I mean, my mouth is watering just thinking about it. So, we've walked through the 5 simple ingredients, the 0 mixing bowl preparation, and that beautiful golden brown baked finish. It really is exactly as simple as the name implies. So, I want to leave you with this final thought. With a recipe this completely effortless, what is stopping you from baking tonight? Grab a pan, dump those ingredients, and experience the genius of this dessert for yourself. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope you learned something new, and most importantly, happy baking.